Return then to the war in Ukraine, with reports that the US Vice President JD Vance has warned that Russia may face sanctions and military action if President Putin doesn't agree to a peace deal. Colonel Simon Diggins is a former British defence attaché in Kabul and joins me now. Very good morning to you, Colonel Diggins. First of all, leaders are arriving in Munich this morning ahead of this security conference. I wonder what you think the mood will be amongst them after Donald Trump in the last few days has announced his plan for peace in Ukraine.
I think the first thing that will be, and good morning to you all, is a degree of realism that the world has changed. I mean, this is not something which has been come out of the blue. I mean, both President Trump and his team have been signalling this for a while, that the expectation is that Europe will pick up the baton of its own defence, and specifically, it will start to look after Ukraine itself. So the mood, I think, is going to be very sombre in Munich, and they'll be looking very hard to see what does American support mean, because what President Trump has said is, he said that we will support NATO, but we will not be suckers. Now, I think the reaction is, for that from the Europeans, will be very interesting to watch, because the perception on the American side is essentially that Europe's been taking America for a ride over many years, expecting the American defence umbrella to be in place, but not actually putting the hard yards in and the money in, the resources to defend themselves.
Well, yes, and what does that mean for the UK and the UK's defence spending?
Well, I mean, currently our position is absurd and unrealistic. I mean, we're arguing at the moment about, we have 2.3%. We have the Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, and the Foreign Secretary saying that there'll be a path to 2.5% in due course. The Prime Minister said that he'll lay something out in the spring settlement. Running in parallel with that, we've had this defence review, and the argument running around yesterday was whether they might be able to stretch to 2.65%. I mean, those figures are just simply far too low. I mean, a considerable body of opinion suggests something like 3% is probably essential. And if you really want to get back everything's been lost over the last 10, 15 years, we need to move something closer to 5%, which is what President Trump has said. So I think the government's also facing a very hard time at the moment. It's going to look itself very hard in the face and say, are we serious about maintaining our defence? And now also serious about essentially picking up the burden of defending Ukraine in whatever looks like the post-ceasefire position. So politically, I think the government's going to find an innovative position. But our current defence expenditure plans are frankly unrealistic if we're talking about a serious defence of our country.
And what are the implications for Ukraine of what's been said so far? It appears that the country is being asked to give away a fair amount before the start of any formal negotiations. Donald Trump said it's unlikely that Ukraine would return to pre-war borders, and also that it wasn't practical for Ukraine to join NATO. So is Ukraine right to be concerned?
I think so, but again, I think there's this element of realism. I mean, there's been and it's notable in a war, in particular a war against an aggressive enemy like Putin, that the rhetoric has been much in far of the reality. The reality has been since at least 2023 that Ukraine has not been in a position to recapture.
Colonel Diggins, I'm going to cut in. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are actually hearing from JD Vance in Munich right now on this issue. So let's just listen in.
And I want to thank you for the American people for everything you are doing to keep the whole world safe, basically. And I know there are many theaters in the world you really have to take your attention to. So I do understand the issue of burden sharing. It is crucial. I also want to thank you personally for everything you have done over the years in engaging with Europe. It has been noted, you have been here before, and it's really important. And I look forward also from that perspective to our talks. And on Europe stepping up, the European part of NATO stepping up, you are absolutely right. It has to be done. We have to grow up in that sense and spend much more. We also have to discuss the defense industrial base. Of course, this is a problem we have both in the US and in the rest of NATO. We are simply not producing enough. We are not keeping up with the Russians and the Chinese. And then, of course, Ukraine. How to bring Ukraine to a lasting peace. No Minsk again, so it has to be lasting. Putin should never try it again. And how to get them into a place of maximum strength when the talks start. So, a lot to discuss, and we're looking forward also to build a relationship.
Great. Likewise. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President,
Thank you all. Good to see you guys.
Should Europe be involved in these talks between US, Russia, and Ukraine?
I'm sure they should. Of course.
OK, we're going to leave that, what looks like a slightly impromptu news conference there with the Vice President, JD Vance, and Mark Rutte, who's the Secretary-General of NATO there. Colonel Diggins, apologies for that interruption. Clearly, a lot of these discussions are going to go on throughout the day, which may well shed some light on the future. On the subject of JD Vance, just want to get your take on an interview he's done with the Wall Street Journal in which he's talked about the US possibly hitting Moscow with sanctions if President Putin doesn't agree to a peace deal and guarantee Kyiv's long-term independence. I wonder what you make of those comments.
I think it's part of the, if you like, the overall Trump team negotiation stance. It's kind of a carrot and stick. I mean, at the moment, the reality, of course, is Russia is subject to a significant amount of sanctions already. And President Trump, soon after he came into power, put more sanctions onto Russia. Now, what Trump would like to do, I think, is take some of those sanctions off. Now, I think there's the cat's a carrot and stick. So the deal with Putin will be some of those sanctions will be removed in exchange for you basically agreeing to the peace deal. So I think that's how that particular thing will be used. As I said, a kind of balance against the concessions which others might need to make. OK, well, Colonel Simon Diggins, we really appreciate your time this morning, and apologies again for interrupting you halfway through your interview, but it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. My pleasure.